I've been doing this a long time. This is, in my view, the single worst public corruption thing that's happened in this town.
Quite the statement from iconic Bayou City investigator Wayne Dolcefino. He's talking about the Houston Housing Authority's controversial low-income 800 Middle Street project. In case you haven't heard, the $130 million complex is literally surrounded by toxic waste dumps and a former Superfund site. This week, a smoking gun emerged after years of demanding records. That is a 2019 letter confirming the Housing Authority and its development partner, NRP, knew there was contamination on the East Side property, but decided to break ground anyway. That's important because 2 years later, on bond applications to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, neither the Housing Authority nor its development partner disclosed as required any environmental factor that could adversely affect health and safety.
Really? It's 2024. Are we really going to put more poor people in a place that's contaminated?
This is our taxpayers' dollars financing these developers while they profit and the poor people always suffer.
While both the Housing Authority and developer NRP say they stand by their statements to the state and to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it's hard to deny their own documents are at the very least incriminating. And I want to start with you, Chris Tritico. You've taken a look at some of the stuff.
Yeah, when you look at the documents, it's clear that they failed to disclose this critical information, and it was necessary information. And so if the federal government gets involved, lying on these forms is a crime. And lying to a federal officer is a bigger crime generally than the conspiracy that got you involved in this in the first place. That carries 20 years. The conspiracy carries 5. And so you've got both state crimes and federal crimes here that could be investigated and looked at on this case alone that could land somebody in prison for up to 20 years or longer.
Bill, you've kept up with this issue as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with my co-counsel, Chris. I worked on the savings and loan cases back in the 80s and the 90s, and a lot of those cases were built on omission, fraud by omission. If you're asked a question and you omit a material fact, then that is the same thing as lying under federal and state law. And I just don't understand how when you look at the questions they were asked, and they said, no problem on this. And clearly, and I've always wondered what NRP knew about it, and now we know they have a letter that they understood that this was all going on out there, and they still, participate in filling out the application along with Houston Housing Authority, saying there's not any problems there. And I just don't, look, if anybody actually investigates this and looks at it, unfortunately, follow-up on investigation is pretty weak these days, but somebody does. I don't see how somebody doesn't get in trouble.
Go ahead, Tamar.
Let's start with the sale, which should have been canceled. When this came out during Anise Parker's administration, they looked at this and they saw that a third of the purchased land that they were looking at was so contaminated that HUD pulled it out of the deal.
Yes.
They shouldn't even have done that because seepage is real. You have this part contaminated, this part not. Give it with the rain and the hurricanes, all that's going to end up going over there. It should have been dull. It should have been ended. But not only was it not ended, the same $50 million price tag that was on the whole thing is what got paid for 2/3 of the thing. Do that math and find that money for me.
All right. Well, the Cockrells made a big pile of money.
Yes, they did.
April, what's your take on this?
They're not the only ones that made money. We got to follow the money because not only is this wrong, it's criminal. That you're willing to masquerade yourself and say, I'm here to help the poor, I'm here to help the misfortunate, but you're willing to put them in a place that will become a cancer cluster is sickening to me. And here we have the wife of Rodney Ellis who pocketed lots of money. All I'm just saying is, where's the Rangers? Where's Ken Paxton? Because we got to dig in this. There's a lot of people that need to pay up. Not only do we need to call back on this corruption, but we got to make this right for the city of Houston.
All right, Charles, and this was one of those infamous now public facility corporations too, right?
The gift that keeps on giving. Well, what's interesting, I wish council would call in NRP for a conversation about this, and I'd say the Housing Authority too, but we've seen changes in administration, obviously new people at the Housing Authority, and there have been previous developments where council had questions to NRP and asked them to come before council. I think it was about 1.5 years ago, and they answered some questions, and so you would think that they would do the same here and start to ask some some questions. The reporting has been going on for, I mean, we're on the better part of, what, 3-4 months now from this iteration of reporting. And so, yeah, I think NRP at least has some questions to answer. And we need to start asking questions about the folks who are no longer at the Housing Authority and have them come in and answer questions as well.
All right, we'll stay on it.